Thank you for joining us here for episode 4 of the National Running PodShow. We're really looking forward to this episode, so here's what's coming up. It's the man who ran 76 marathons in 76 days. Josh Patterson tells us about this challenge and more. Jamie chats chafing with Mike as he switches the host seat for the hot seat. Trevor from Run3D talks through the tech of Gait Analysis. He's told us about the Great North Run in a previous episode, and now he's back to tell us about the 13 Valleys Ultra. Speaking of recurring guests, Emily from SIS is here to talk all things nutrition. And finally, in the advice section, Tom is here as an expert to talk us through fueling. And of course, our amazing sponsors, Runderwear, are giving away yet another £100 voucher, so check out this episode's and all the vouchers in the previous ones as well. Without further ado, let's head straight over to our hosts.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 4 of the National Running PodShow. Thank you for coming back. We're still here, 4 episodes in. We're doing all right, guys. How are you?
All good, thank you. Yeah, great.
Good stuff. Right, now today I want us to talk about tech. Now, there's this big move in running, like we're getting a lot more information. We've got like Strava, we've got watches, we've got earphones. How do you feel about it? Do you use it? Are you into it? Do you go naked? Like, what do you think?
I can't remember the last time I went for a naked run in the watch sense or the actual sense. But I can't. My watch broke a few years ago and I went for a run without it, and it did feel like I was naked, which I kind of never thought. Like when I started running, I had just like an analog watch that I remember doing my first 10k and squinting at it to see if I got under an hour, and I just never thought I'd be that person. But yeah, I always record my runs, and I think I do just like having a diary of them for me. Like I love seeing what I did. And like my dad's got a notebook where he's literally written every run he's been on for 20 years, and I guess it just needs the digital version of that, and that's the main thing I love about it.
Is that to see your progression as a runner then?
No, I haven't run a PB for 6 years. I've completely no progression whatsoever. I think for me, because I love running. It's like my favourite hobby. It's the thing I do on holidays. It's the thing I do with my friends. And I love it when Strava says, "Oh, you did this run 3 years ago," and then there's a photo of like an amazing. It is just like a scrapbook almost.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely addicted to it. It's not always a good thing, but I do love being able to see
tech dependence, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's just across the whole life,
Yeah.
it's tech dependence. But I ran in Istanbul Marathon in November and I didn't wear a watch.
Ooh.
So I went naked
How'd you
for
feel?
the marathon. It was weird. I'll be honest. I sort of got to the first K and I was like, oh, am I going to... I don't know.
Were you going for a time?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Did you go faster or slower? What did it do?
So I ended up going through halfway in 1:23. So it was a little bit...
And what did you want to go?
Around it, or just a bit, maybe a bit. I was a bit fast. And it felt... I think it was quite good because I didn't quite know how fit I was or not. Like I didn't really know what I should be going for, and I thought... there's no real pressure here. I'm just going to take off my watch and just go for it. And in the end, it was a headwind that did me. That was 16k into a headwind. So I was never going to run a really, really, really sort of PB, if you know what I mean. So, yeah. But it wasn't the tech. I
think it's quite. I think Strava in particular has done a lot for the running. I find it really supportive. And actually, I quite like Strava because I like seeing my own personal progression.
Yeah.
But I kind of, if I do a run and I don't record it on Strava, it freaks me out.
Yeah.
Do you guys...
It is almost like it didn't count, even though I know I went for the run, which is... And I think it depends how you feel about it, isn't it? Because I've got a friend who gets really, really bothered by, like, if she's ran a slower time, and she'll hide her runs on Strava because it really gets her down. And I think if you're... I guess, like with any sort of social media, if you are maybe, like, wired in a way that it does really bother you, it's obviously not a healthy thing.
Oh gosh.
You got to protect yourself. I think if it's not giving you a positive outcome. I think.
Yeah. Moving away from watches though, headphones.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think they're. I mean, I don't know whether this is actually factually correct, but I remember a stat saying that you run 15% further and faster if you run to music.
Is that right?
I think it was. I think it was a Swedish university or something that came up with this stat, and they did a study, and they said that you run 15% faster and.
Hashtag science. We've nailed that. That's definitely a fact.
That's totally
Are you in the headphones gang or out?
Definitely in. Bone conductors all the way. It means you can also hear your environment, which I think is really important. But I am completely tone deaf and can't clap in time. so I'm not really that into music in general, but I'm podcasts, like a wall-to-wall podcast.
You've been pretty good at the start of the episodes.
Yeah, but that was there's no beat to that.
What you won't hear from this, viewers and listeners, is that when we start recording, we all have to do a clap, and Elise is the only one of us that can actually clap properly because she's an actual grown-up. I mean, from my side, I actually find on the longer runs, so when I do ultras and things like that, I actually really like not having music or podcasts. I kind of like switching out.
Yeah, I agree. When I'm doing an ultra, I actually never listen to anything. So I'll listen to podcasts back to back in all my training, but in any race, I never do. Even when not just like in a city marathon where it's really busy and buzzy, but like an ultra where you're alone on your trails, I still don't listen to anything weirdly. I think to me, race means at one with nature.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I think that's a good way to end that section. Yeah. We would like to just remind you of the Runderwear Competition. So follow the notes in the show notes and that will tell you how to enter the competition. Every episode we give away £100 of Runderwear vouchers, and also if you go to the Runderwear website and use the code PodShow, then you can get 10% discount. Now on to our next guest.
I've cut Mike off there slightly, but that's only because he's going on to say the wrong name, silly Mike. Anyway, who we do have coming up is the amazing Josh Patterson.
Hey, it's Elise, and I'm here chatting to Josh Patterson today, who I'm sure is going to tell us about, I mean, you've got so much going on, but I guess a good place to start would be last year in May, you finished a mega challenge running 76 marathons in 76 cities. Yeah. Which, am I right in saying probably your biggest challenge so far?
Yeah, do you know what? It's mad. When I actually look back at the last several years and some of the challenges I've done, that's one of the biggest questions you'll get, is being like, is this the biggest? It's so difficult to say because actually I felt worse in shorter challenges. Let's say it's like a 24-hour period. Like things like John O'Groats to Land's End I did in a wheelchair, that was 19 days. Even though Run for 1 Million was 76 days, the comparison, I don't know, like they're so brutal and amazing, but in their own way.
I definitely know what you mean. Like I often say, like I've done quite a few ultras and big challenges. I think the hardest thing I've ever done is my half marathon PB. Yeah. Like it's different types of difficult. I think
100%, and I think that's what makes it so exciting, because I think if you just repeated the same thing every time, there probably would be a lack of interest, just because, you know, if you've proven that you're capable of doing one thing, why would the second be any different? So this was certainly taxing in the sense that it was over 2 months, and I think just the different types of terrain, cities, the weather conditions, it was so unique, and the fact that we were basically sleeping in this camper van in some pretty questionable places. But in terms of the reaction to it, I think this was probably received better than any challenge I've ever done before.
Because you had people running with you, didn't you, on the marathon? Yeah. So obviously I guess it just gave people a chance to actually come and experience it with you. Because it's all well and good kind of watching it from afar, but like you literally could bring people along with you on it. Was that always the plan?
100%. So for me, this was the first time I was able to interact with people. And what was really important was that we had to make it as accessible for runners, whether they wanted to do 100 meters or they wanted to do the full marathon. The pace that we did it at. And I had this one rule where if you managed to maintain a certain distance with us, so if you were with us until like the 3/4 mark, even if that person was dropping considerably behind, and that added 2 more hours onto the marathon, if we started together, we'd finish together. And we had so many individuals that came and joined who only had the ambition of running 5 or 10K and ended up running the full marathon with us, which was so special. Or people that had a certain distance where psychologically they had that block and they exceeded it by running with other people because they were inspired. And I think for me, like the standout thing was I started in Inverness with one person running with me. And at the end, we crossed that finish line at Buckingham Palace with hundreds. Like we shut the place down. And that will be forever just one of the most special moments, I think, in my life.
What do you think it was about it that made people feel like, people who'd never done that kind of thing before, feel like they could get involved? I ask because when I did my run around the coast, like quite a lot of people come and run with me.
Yeah.
And I'd sometimes get somebody who'd never run more than 10k, and they come and we do like a 20+ mile day, and I beat myself up a lot about, oh, I'm not like the best runner, I'm not the fastest. But then reflecting on it, I think actually that's probably why those people came, because they didn't think, oh, there, you're a super runner. Like, was that when you're thinking about how to communicate the challenge, is that something you consciously had in mind?
100%. The connection is the most valuable thing.
Yeah.
If you don't get the connection right, then it's not to say the challenge won't be a success on a personal level. I'm sure it can, but I think if you're trying to I guess, get the message out there to a larger demographic, you're probably going to struggle. For me, it was really important from a number of different factors. From an ability point, as I said, I think just highlighting to individuals that this wasn't about running PBs in terms of time. It was about unity and togetherness. And then the core message, which was to give a person a reason to live. For me, it was showcasing to individuals that vulnerability is strength, and it's okay to feel a certain way and to express yourself. And there was a really powerful moment in the challenge where I hadn't realised. I basically told my team on the very first marathon that it was inevitable I'd get injured and I'd sustain a lot of pain. But I had a stress fracture in my left foot and I tore my right calf. And this particular marathon, because the legs had gone, I physically couldn't run. And I started crying for pretty much an entire half marathon. But that was the turning point where so many men started to come and run with me and open up, where for them, I'd completely shifted this ideology of what weakness was. Originally, if they saw a man crying, it would be, nah, not having that. But the fact that I'd come off the back of 40 consecutive marathons from a physical point, I'd earned their respect and changed their perceptions altogether, and their relationships with their wives or their children or their friends had changed, where they felt more comfortable to express themselves. And so, you know, I think you have to have a clear view for anyone that's watching this in terms of what it is that you're trying to achieve and how you're going to articulate that message to someone where they can digest it and connect with it.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful message. And I think it is shifting a bit, because I think there used to be this thing that you ran and you got stronger and you got tougher. Whereas now I think it's fine to accept that. I like the message of like, I do this and I find it hard and it's difficult, but you can do it in spite of that rather than to kind of cure that. It's always going to be hard. There's going to be hard times. You're going to cry.
Yeah, oh my God, 100%. And it's good to do that. I think that's the powerful thing about running for me, is that running's it's not cool. It's expressive. And I think it's the one time in your life where you can smell and look terrible and everyone be accepting of that, because ultimately you are putting yourself through something that is so strenuous and there's such bliss to it. I like the fact that I go into such a feral state in these challenges because I ultimately give myself to it, where vanity just goes completely out the window. It's just, you're so focused on the performance and the outcome of it itself. I think for me, like, this is just the greatest gift and opportunity to try and influence people in as many ways as possible to come into this, but to have that responsibility where hopefully we can guide them in the right way. Because I think certainly from a male point of view, there are a lot of individuals out there that cater for a certain market where it's just about blood, sweat, tears, intense masculinity. And I'm not saying that that's not a successful outcome, but I don't think that caters for everyone. So I think the more voices we have from more different backgrounds, connecting with as many different demographics as possible, that's how we can broaden, I think, the investment in this sport.
Yeah, for sure. And you've mentioned your team a few times. So I always think when I watch these challenges, I'm like, the person doing it, incredible, but the team, like, they've got the hardest job, haven't they?
100%.
How did you put the team together? Like, how did that work?
It's taken time. So like whenever I had a couple of awards last year, and there was a really special one at the Just Giving where I got everyone on my team over the past 6 years of every challenge I've ever done. I invited them as my guest and I got them to stand up, and I said, the people that really should be on this stage right now is these guys. They are the reason that I've succeeded. Now, it's taken me so many years to get to the point where I've sieved out certain individuals, and for me, when it comes to the team members, it's the qualities they need to have. Which ones are going to push you? Which ones can empathise with your situation in terms of the emotional maturity as well, and that resilient mindset. And so my team basically right now consists of a physio, soft tissue therapist, S&C coach, run coach, sometimes even just like a bit of a mentor, and even a therapist. Therapy is really key when it comes to this, because you are not only kind of subjecting yourself to other people's stories and journeys, but you also have yours too. And I think it's really important to be able to maybe reflect on these experiences and express it to someone in a professional setting to kind of like release it. Otherwise it just kind of like builds it up the whole time. What was really special about my team for Run 4 Million though was the fact that they went above and beyond. Simon, my biokinetics coach, joined me for a marathon in each of the 4 countries, which meant a great deal. Sharon, my soft tissue therapist, the minute I was injured or in pain, I didn't even have to message her. She would fly to a different country to come help me, even if it was just for a couple of hours. And they all ran their own distances. Everyone ran at least a marathon with me. And I just think when you have a team like that behind you, it just... it's like a safety net. You just know you're safe. And Chris Taylor, my right-hand man on that challenge, he was phenomenal. Not only did this guy drive me from city to city, but he pretty much ran every other day. One of the most powerful moments for me was somewhat at the beginning in Northern Ireland, where him and I were running in a city called Armagh, and it was rain and snow the entire time. It was freezing. He did the whole marathon with me to just keep me stimulated, and then he did interval training on a treadmill straight after. So when you surround yourself with exceptional people, you will achieve exceptional things.
More from Josh later, but now we switch into an alternate universe where Jamie is in the hot seat.
Hi guys, for today's kit section I've got a bit of a special guest. It's Jamie! So as you know, Runderwear have kindly sponsored the podcast and have been a big part of the journey here, but actually what we wanted to do is talk to Jamie a little bit more about some of the products they have. So welcome, mate.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
So, let's get into it. I really want to talk about your journey with Runderwear and actually, how did you come about setting up a clothing company? Where did that start?
It's an interesting one. So I was running a marathon, ran New York and training, and I got awful chafing. And
I mean, how bad are we talking?
Near enough blood.
Oh, no.
You've been there before, I'm sure.
Sorry, listeners, if you've all checked that out.
And I came back to my running club and I was speaking to the guys, and we were out on a 5 parks training run around London, and we got back and I told them about it, and they said, that's just part of marathon running, like sort of just get on with it, that's it. And I just thought,
when was this? How long ago was this?
So that was 2007, I think, something like that.
That's mad.
Yeah, so it's quite a long time ago, and at that point, that was just the moment where I thought, why should we just accept this chafing? So I sort of just had it in my mind. I didn't really do anything about it right there and then. And then roll on a few years later, it started to get to a point where I thought, actually, I can develop this now. So just slowly formed a few prototypes and
Wait, how do you form like a prototype? Because that feels like a stretch.
Well, I didn't have a textile background, so I had to learn quite a lot and quite fast, and did quite a few. I've done 265,000 miles around the world in airplanes. I worked out over...
What?
Yeah, over...
So hang on, you're just some dodgy dude straight out of university, and you're going to factories and you're going, can you make me some pants?
Yeah, I did a bit of research and got some advice from people. I didn't just go in completely cold, got some advice from the right people, and then started learning on the job. I mean, I was going into places and people were talking the lingo. I had no idea what these acronyms were, and I was just sort of nodding my head.
Googling it afterwards.
There was no AI, so so I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. Just writing it down as if like, I'm going to have to translate this after.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really was like sort of starting from scratch.
And then when you get from there to a prototype, I mean, were some of those early prototypes, I imagine, pretty ropey?
Yeah, not great. I mean, to be honest, we were pretty good. There were some ergonomic changes that just needed to be made, and we did it mainly for men to begin with, and then other girls in the running club were like, well, hang on a second. We also have the same issues as well, and then asked them questions, got some feedback, and then we brought out one style for women and one style for men, and that's how we started. We took it to the London Marathon Expo, and we'd sold out within a couple of days. So that was it, and from there on, I picked it up. Obviously, learning curve was pretty steep, and 265,000 miles later, quite a lot of travelling over the years.
That's insane.
Spending a month at a time in the Far East. It was hard.
It's just one of those things that you now take for granted, that you runners now run, and you pick very carefully, and particularly men, the type of underwear that you run in, because it can have quite extreme consequences if you don't. And it just feels weird that no one has spotted that gap in the market before you guys.
I think, when we get some great stories now, like that come in on emails, and people that come to our stands and say, oh my gosh, I couldn't have done that 100-miler without your product. And that's great, because that's what we are. We're an enabler brand. We love that story, the ethos of the running community. You're part of it, And it's great to just have people that come and tell those stories, and we've allowed them to run that 100 miles because of one certain product that might not have worked. And we had the same thing with socks and different things, and we'll talk about that in I think in another episode. But these are the products we love making, because we get the great feel-good stories after as a brand.
No, I think it's cool. So let's get techie about the products.
Yeah, sure.
So what are they made of? What material do you use, and why?
The difference is that if you can imagine, your normal underwear is generally is cut and sew. So you'll have patterns which will be cut out and then sewn up on a sewing machine. That's effectively how a cut and sew product would be made. These are made on, the best way to describe it is a 360-degree sort of printing machine, but with yarn, as opposed like a fabric. Okay. So it comes out and it's circular.
So explain that to me. Yarn.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yarn.
Because you're now a textile guru, but I am not.
No, absolutely not. No. I'm always learning, but I'm a bit geeky now on which actual yarn we use. So you have like a bobble of wool.
Yeah.
You'll have the same, but it's not a bobble of wool. It's on a cone, and that then gets put onto a machine, and then it knits it. It's pretty cool. We have some footage on our Instagram, and it knits it in a 360. So there's different parts of the yarn on the machine. It knits it, and then it drops out at the end, and then we just have to seal it up. And we had to do quite a lot of trial and error on where to seal it up. So
where do you seal it?
So if you can imagine here, we seal it in positions where it won't chafe.
Okay. So for our audio viewers, do you want to describe that?
Yeah. So
or audio listeners, you can't view audio, can you?
Yeah. It's 360 degree seamless technology. That is what we're using, as opposed to cut and sew.
Yep.
Yeah. There has to be minimal amount of seams. That's what we wanted to cut down.
So it's the seams that give you the chafing. Is that traditionally?
Not always. Depends on the fabric. Because if you run in, I think we've all been there, where we've gone out on maybe a long run with a cheap T-shirt, maybe some of the finisher T-shirts.
Yeah, we've all seen
dare I say it?
Those guys with the slight red stains.
That's it. So if you look at that, that would be a cheap fabric, which may be quite abrasive on the skin. So we wouldn't use that. So we use premium yarns, high quality. I go to actual fabric and yarn shows, just talking about fabric and yarn for
There's
two
a
full
show
days.
about fabric and yarn?
Yeah.
The National Fabric and Yarn Show. This might be my next idea. So you go, and so you've picked the premium yarn, so that that's the bit that doesn't irritate the skin.
Yeah, and we're now using recycled, which is great.
Fantastic. So fully recycled.
Fully recycled. So we did a lot of work on trying to source fully recycled elastane. So that was the problem, because it is a mix between polyamide and elastane. And now we have a recycled elastane, which is where I've been trying to get to, and now it's 100% fully recycled, and that will be coming through our ecosystem.
That's amazing.
In years to come.
Yeah. And can you recycle these afterwards as well? Are they recyclable?
Because, well, at the moment, no, because it's a mixed yarn. So when you have anything that's mixed, it's difficult to recycle. So no, I think in the future we'll probably get to a point of a biodegradable,
Amazing.
Possibly, but. Again, that's why I go to the shows, to keep on top of the technology as to like how it's come along. And when the tech is there, we try and use the latest and greenest, most sustainable yarns we possibly can.
I think that's the thing with sustainability and brands. I think people have to understand it's a journey, and as long as you're moving forwards, you're progressing the technology.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, we're not out there saying, you know, we do absolutely everything right and whatever. We try and do, as a small to medium-sized company, as best as we possibly can within the framework and resources that we've got.
Yeah, of course.
And that's it. And but so we're always looking for those things, and packaging's another thing. So. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll come on to packaging, but take me back to the pants, which is a line I thought I'd never say.
Men's and women's. So this is our bestseller in the men's. This is our men's boxer for the audio listeners, audio viewers. Trademark.
We're such pros.
So these are basically the chafe busting pant that I needed on that New York Marathon, and now we've made it. We've now got over 10,000 Trustpilot reviews at 4.6 stars, so we're in a pretty good place.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's great. So if you
And what's different about these? Because I've actually used these. Is this bit here on the legs as well, right?
So there's a little silicone gripper which just makes sure that it doesn't roll up the leg, which we all know is a little annoying.
Yeah.
So we just put in a nice little silicone gripper. Keeps it in place, whether it be under your shorts or under your leggings. Yeah.
So for our listeners who aren't watching this, that's kind of almost at the top of where your thigh would be, and it sort of grips to your thigh, which holds it in place. Yeah. Okay, so no seams, made with awesome technology. Yeah. Anything about sweat? Is sweat an issue that you have to consider about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the yarns themselves are technical yarns, so they are fully breathable. Yeah. Allows the sweat to wick away. I mean, I've done some pretty hot ultra marathons and marathons in these.
In this pair? Because if so, I'm putting it down right now.
Yeah, no, they would, and also they're a medium, so they're not your size. I know you're a small, so but if you want a pair, I can get some after the show. Yeah.
This is amazing. So, if you were to describe the reason to use specialist pants when running, like, what would be your sales pitch to people?
I think it's just ultimate comfort, and the thing that we always get on reviews is, I forgot I had them on, which is exactly what we want. So if you've put your underwear on, good underwear is that you forget about it, and it's just done its job, and you don't think about it. If you're out on your run thinking, oh, this underwear is annoying me, or it's moving, that's not where you want to be. So we'd like to think that this combats it, and we've got a few reviews now over the last decade that back it up.
10,000 as you chucked it out. No, and I think it's really important. I think for me with my running, it's about having a number of basics that just don't bother you. Yeah. And it starts with your shoes and your socks and all of those things, and then it's underwear, it's your t-shirt and all of those things. Yeah. If you can take away those impediments, then actually all you need to focus on is the running rather than the extras. So
precisely. Yeah, no, exactly.
It's amazing, mate. Well, thank you for coming on. It does feel a bit weird having you on here, given you're a host, but actually this is a really awesome product. So thank you for supporting the show, and I'm sure we'll see you in 2 seconds for another chat.
Exactly. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Jamie.
Thanks.
On to some tech now, and wow, the host has an unbelievable background in this section. If you're watching, then you really are being blessed. Hi, welcome to this week's tech section, where I have Trevor from Run3D to talk a bit more about Gait Analysis. Now, for some people, they'll know what Gait Analysis is, but Trevor, for those that maybe don't, can you tell us a bit more about it?
Well, I think the first thing we've got to do is consider the biomechanics of running. It's actually a start-stop motion. So when your foot hits the ground, it has to be able to stop in order to be stable so that the swing leg can accelerate you into the next stage. In order to do that, there will be a certain amount of impact that your body has to absorb, and you have to be able to control that motion using your muscles and joints and ligaments. So what happens then is, in order to measure that, if you want to do a full gait analysis, you have to consider the force that goes through the limb. You have to consider the position that the joints go into, which then gives us an indication of the forces that the muscles and the joints absorb. So a true gait analysis, a full gait analysis, measures the force, it measures the angles, and it calculates the power and energy in those muscles as well as the vibration.
So how does this differ if I'm going to buy a new running shoe and I'm going into my local running shop and heading onto the treadmill, and they track that my running style? How does this differ from that?
Okay, so when you go into a running shoe store, they're going to use video analysis to try and do some freeze frame work, and that will give you a certain amount of information. In fact, a lot of that analysis is focused around the position of the leg and the shoe. And unfortunately, actually, the evidence suggests that that's not a particularly reliable test. And one of the reasons for that is you don't really know what the foot's doing inside the shoe. So I could show you a video still of a patient with 2 pronated feet, one's worse than the other. When you put them in the shoe, it actually goes the other way round. So there are some problems with that. And it's also difficult to quantify, and there are a whole range of the angles that you're not measuring with that assessment.
So obviously this is a tech section, so it'd be good for people to get an understanding of actually, if they're going in for the first time to get an analysis, what they'll be confronted with on the technology side of things. Like, how does that all work?
So in order to be able to measure the angles accurately, we need to use a marker system. So if you think of those little balls that they use for animating in Hollywood, it's exactly the same process. So we place markers that allow us to track the position of the pelvis, hips, knees and ankle, which includes on your shoes. We then use 3 infrared cameras that record at 200 seconds, 200 frames per second, so it can track those whilst you're running. The real secret of the system is normally it takes a long time to process that data, but with the Run 3D system, it can process the data extremely quickly. And then what it does is it takes your values and statistically compares it to an uninjured control group. So we're then looking for, are there big asymmetries between your left and right side? Are there big differences whether increased motion or reduced motion compared to an uninjured control group? The way your foot works is a combination of what your foot can do and what your body asks it to do. So if you did a squat on both legs, you feel certain pressures and forces. If you do it on one leg, it feels different. And your foot function's not changed, but what your body's asked it to do. So when we're analysing, say, a shoe, or we're analysing orthoses, all the research shows us it's quite unpredictable where in the chain you get that response. All right, so what we can do with kinematics is if we're looking at different shoes or orthotics, we can look to see where it has an effect. And in some people we see everything looks better, some people everything looks worse, and some people some things look better and some things look worse. So if people have been struggling with footwear or orthoses or whatever, we can use that to help kind of guide our advice.
So is this going to help me get faster? Is it going to help me prevent injury? Is it going to make me perform better? How is this going to help my overall running?
Well, it's kind of a little bit of everything, really. I mean, I think the first thing to say, if we look at the science, we don't have much hard evidence that any one intervention or any one thing prevents injury. But what we do know is there are certain kinematic positions that have been linked to injury, and therefore if someone's looking to optimize their performance, we can try and identify whether there are any obvious areas that may be a potential risk that we can then advise against. We use it a lot for treating people that have had injuries. So if you've got an injury that you're struggling to get over, or you've had one injury and it's become recurrent, or you've had one injury, then you get another injury and then you get another injury, we're looking to break that system down to see why that might be. So it's a bit like taking the old car engine. If you replace one bit, you stress the rest and they fall off. Or if you put a new tyre on, you have to balance the tyre, because if you don't balance the tyre, the whole car shakes and a bit falls off. So we're really looking for trying to balance the system and reduce those kind of extra forces that may contribute to problems.
Is gait analysis for a particular type of runner, whether it be short distance, long distance, brand new to running, been running for years and years? Can gait help improve whether you're in any of those demographics?
Yeah, I don't think that we'd really categorize it for a certain group. So, you know, it really depends on where you are. So you might get a new runner that's interested in seeing what's their function like, what are they like in a particular trainer. Are there any areas that, you know, they may be thinking that if they develop some symptoms that there may be an issue there, that kind of stuff. It may be for somebody that's just interested in it because they want to know what's going on and try and optimize it. We've certainly had some people that have had recurrent injuries, but now they want to see whether or not they can get over those, but also see if they can improve their performance. I mean, I think the bizarre thing is we've worked with some fairly high level performers, and we can definitely see that they've reduced their injury rate and been able to perform at a better level. But once they can perform at a better level, they push themselves harder and get different injuries. You know, that's the nature of a runner.
So I'm completely sold on the technology now. I want to go and get this done. Where can I go to help improve my running, help my injury recovery, all of these things that we've spoken about?
Yeah, so we've got clinics all over the UK, from the south coast up to Scotland. There's some clinics in Europe and around the world, America, China, etc. Best bet is to go onto the website, which is run3d.co.uk, and look at where the clinics are and look at the one that's nearest to you.
And those links will be in the description below. Trevor, thank you so much for coming on to this tech section.
Yeah, my pleasure.
For all the people that were listening, no, it wasn't interesting. It was quite literally a white wall. Anyway, back to part 2 of Josh's interview.
I think he's really interested about what you're saying about having a therapist on the team, because I think there's often this thing, and it is true to some extent, about running being amazing for your mental health and like a bit of a cure-all, but I actually find a lot of time you're really vulnerable when you're that tired, and it brings out a lot of things, and I think it's not just as simple as go for a run, feel better.
Yeah.
Like I think it's quite, they do go hand in hand. I definitely do feel better when I go for a run, but also you go to dark places on challenges like that.
100%. Like if you go into like the trail space, you know, I found myself, there was one, I did an ultra in the jungle, and I got chatting to this lad for I think we took it there for about 4 hours. And you know, his story, he opened up where he's a functioning addict, and ultra running was kind of like his new vice almost. He just lost his brother in prison to a heroin overdose, and he'd come off the back of several suicide attempts himself. And that story, although it was incredibly inspiring, when you're absorbing something like that in, and you might be doing that on multiple occasions, I think it's really important that, like I said, you do speak to that professional to just kind of, like I said, reflect on what it is that you've kind of maybe been exposed to. Because I think when you keep that emotion within you, it's like a volcano. It will maintain there, but eventually it has to erupt. And so there's probably just healthier ways of doing it. And I think talking to someone is always going to be the best way.
Yeah, we're interviewing Ali Bailey in this series as well, who's an ultra runner. She's got an amazing book coming out in a couple of weeks. And her story is that she's an alcoholic. She's had a lot of problems with depression. But she said for a long time she was almost thinking, well, I can't be an alcoholic. I can't be depressed because I'm running a marathon every weekend, and you can kind of mask these things, whereas actually it's not just that because you're a runner everything else in your life is great. And I think talking about these things is really important. So what have you got coming up next? Have you got any big challenges in the pipeline? Or
I mean, listen, until my body tells me that it can't go anymore, like my life is committed to raising as much money for charity as I can, to keep doing challenges that excite, inspire, you know, and stimulate people, and to kind of just leave a legacy that I can kind of reflect on and be proud of. You know, I think I've got such an opportunity to continue doing these incredible things, and you know, for me it gives me purpose. You know, I've struggled most of my life with my mental health. You know, my anxiety cripples me, and I had really bad stints of depression, and I've come from the point of suicide or wanting to attempt it. And when you wake up and you have these opportunities, for me it's about gratitude now, where I feel so lucky that I have this second chance, and to be able to connect with people through this sport and support them through their own journey too is just the most fulfilling thing in the world. So for me, it's not about validation or accolades. It is really honestly about this connection. Having somebody come up to you and tell you that you've saved their life or you've improved it is just one of the most humbling things you could possibly hear. And I want it to continue. You know, I have a huge amount of responsibility, and I think when you do start to become quite a credited name in whatever field it is you do, it's really important that you do guide these individuals. And it's not a case if you don't want them to make mistakes. I think that's really key, how you can learn from these things. But if you could maybe guide them in a direction to help improve maybe the journey that they're on, it's really important. Yeah,
for sure. And have you got? I know you've got a book coming out, which sounds, from what you've said, exactly
mental.
Like exactly doing that, kind of trying to guide people. So tell us a bit more about the book. So
firstly, to anyone that ever doubts himself, the fact that I'm writing a book, when I told my friends and family, their reaction was laughter. So I think that says it all. Still get the book though.
Although I always find that I have written a book, and it's so similar in the process I found to doing a big challenge. Like too much time in your own head. But I think if you've ran an ultra, you're well placed to write a book.
Do you know what? And I think it's the information. So what's really, I think, unique about this book is, so it's called Fortune Favours the Brave. And it's 76 short chapters, finding strength and vulnerability. And that's what's key in this. So for me, it was a case of showcasing my journey and the things that I've experienced and taking individuals on that journey themselves. So chapter 1 is, what's your why? let's find that out first. And then for me, like I said, it's that transition to get you to that end point, which is what do you want to be remembered for? Because I think that's really important. And what's great about the book is that even though it's not diagnosed, I'm going to get diagnosed hopefully, because I'm pretty adamant I have ADHD and amongst bloody everything else in the sun, hence why I do these freaking ridiculous things. And we've shortened the chapters, and that's why it is 76 short chapters, because we want this to be as digestible for individuals as possible. Some individuals don't want to read like a 26-page chapter. For me, it could literally be a page or two. Just keep it simple, the font size, things like pictures I think are really important, just so that you have something to reflect on when you're speaking about certain experiences. And I think what's unique about this book is the fact that I am not someone from a young age that was destined for greatness. It's something that has happened literally in the past 6 years off the back of my best friend's motorbike accident, which paralysed him. And this transition in my life, going from a very ordinary person into doing these incredible things. And I'm really hoping that any individual that reads it and has seen what I've done can take inspiration to start the journey on their own. And what I don't want people to confuse, I guess, themselves with this is that this isn't a book where I'm saying you need to be running 76 marathons or doing 24-hour ultras. Everything is relative. If you at the end of this book are capable of achieving 10 steps or your first mile or doing 5 kilometers, that's as successful as a 76. Like I said, it is completely relevant to that person. What somebody else is massive and monumental. To someone could be quite ordinary, and the other way around. So I think it's just make it relevant to you, and I hope it will connect with as many people as possible.
Yeah, definitely. I think the more time you spend kind of in this bubble of people doing ridiculous things, whatever you do, someone's going to have done something bigger, something better. So it is exactly that, isn't it? It's like finding the thing that you're excited about and it's an achievement. Yeah, for sure. Like for you as a person.
Yeah, your environment, everything. Like it really does guide you, who you surround yourself with, and the fact I talk about my team and, you know, just like purpose in life. There are so many factors that I think we maybe neglect. Gratitude, be so grateful. I saw an interview the other day where a guy was getting interviewed and asking this host to kind of move his arm and doing that with his hand, and the guy's laughing, being like, why is he making me do this? And he said, what you've just done there is somebody else's dream. They will go through their entire life working to achieve what you've just done there. And look at you, like, we do just take these simple things for granted. So for me, it's just reminding people of that.
And I think that's like one of the best things about running, how especially we do these hard things. I don't know about you, but I go for a long run and it just makes me appreciate everything so much more, like a cup of tea, a hot shower, a warm jumper. And I think that's, like, for me, one of the most powerful things about running.
Strip it back. Honestly, I think that's the problem with life right now, is that unfortunately everything is so accessible and there's so much luxury. And actually, when you strip it back, you're right, like spending 76 days in a camper van with 2 other men, just
must have been
a
cozy.
toilet with privacy and to be able to wash or have clean clothes. When you've gone like a week wearing wet, stinky clothes, just the appreciation for a fresh top makes such a difference. Good nutritious meal, like those packed meals are great, but when you're eating that for a considerable amount of time, it's not great on the stomach. So it's just the basics, I think, that you really look forward to the most.
Yeah, for sure. And if people are kind of interested in hearing more, where can they find you, Josh?
So best way would be probably my Instagram, so Joshua Patterson _JP. And then things like YouTube, Joshua Patterson, where you can start to see now more of mini-series that I've started to shoot, and I'm going to start dropping some of the documentaries that we've shot over the past number of years. And my podcast, I Did a Runner podcast, which actually launches next Tuesday, which is exciting. So that'll give you an opportunity to hear more about myself, my journey, but a lot of people in the running space. Some you may have heard of, some you may not have heard of, but their stories just need to be told. And I can't wait to be the platform that does it.
Amazing. Well, by the time you're listening to this, Josh's podcast will be live. So go and check him out.
Yeah, definitely check out his podcast, but also check out this next race section talking about the 13 Valleys Ultra.
Hey, it's Elise here, and we're back for the race section of the pod show, and I'm here with Colin from 13 Valleys Ultra today. Thanks so much for joining us.
No problem.
Do you want to just tell us a bit about 13 Valleys Ultra and what it is for anyone who's not heard of it?
Yeah, so 13 Valleys Ultra took part for the first time last year in 2023, and really it's a long-standing partnership with the Lake District National Park Authority. And we talked to them about a variety of events. and they're a UNESCO World Heritage Site now, and that's built around the 13 unique valleys of the Lake District.
Yeah.
And we thought we could come in and really help them tell that story, and at the same time deliver a kind of really exciting event concept at the same time.
Oh, amazing. I actually live in the Lake District and I didn't know about the UNESCO 13 Valleys thing, so...
Yeah, exactly. So I, regularly spend a lot of time there as well, and it was something that was kind of news to me, and part of their brief to be a UNESCO site is to shout about it, and we want to help them do that. So as well as it being a one-off event each year at the end of September, the 13 Valleys represents a year-round walking trail that we're establishing as well. So you can go and walk the 13 Valleys 180 kilometres trail at your leisure over a number of weekends. There's an OS map now, and that gives you a chance for anybody to take part and explore the Lake District more than just going to your normal kind of Keswick or Ambleside. And then once a year we celebrate that trail with our series of ultra events.
Oh, it's amazing. So it work a little bit like something like the West Highland Way, where you've got a set trail, there's a race that's on it, but people just go and do it of their own accord as well.
Exactly.
Kind of
So
premise.
Southwest Coastal Path, all those kind of things. So really, there's something there for everyone. If you're a day walker or a hill walker and you want to do it by yourself, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But equally, if you want to make that transition into trail running, we can show you a pathway in. So we have a 2-valley trail, which is 20 kilometres long. We have a 5-valley ultra at 55. We have a 7-valley 110k ultra, and then we have the headline event, which is all 13 valleys, 180 kilometres of exceptional scenery and trails.
Big day out.
A big day out, yeah.
And so did you say it was the first event last year?
It was, yeah. First
did that
event
go?
last year. It was really well received. We wanted to, build the building blocks and get it right. We want to work with a variety of local partners and celebrate the Lake District. So be that Innovate, who are based in the Lakes, or La Sportiva and Petzl, who have big distribution centres there, and Voom Nutrition, who also Lake District based. We really want to celebrate everything that area of the UK has to offer. And I think everyone was delighted, and the runners get really strong feedback.
Yeah, it was only when I moved up to that area that I realised how many businesses are actually kind of have roots there, which obviously makes sense because it's such an amazing place to go running.
Yeah, and I think, people who are in that mindset have an excuse to set a business up in a beautiful part of the world. Why wouldn't you? So, yeah, we work with them, and we also want to just have sustainability at the heart of the event, and that comes with, working with the National Park. 5% of every fee goes to their foundation, which is fixing the fells, developing the footpaths, making sure that the trails are up to the increased footfall, and we have to gradually increase our entrance in line with what we think Natural England will be happy with, going through some of the stunning areas that we're privileged to do so.
Amazing. So I think sometimes the word ultra can be a bit intimidating for people who have not dipped their toe into those long distances yet. Is this an event that kind of anyone can get involved with?
Yeah, absolutely. So
you've got different distances.
Yeah, we're conscious of the word ultra, but there is the 2 Valleys Trail, and the cut-off times are really, really generous. So we want people to succeed, and that 2 Valleys Trail has as much kind of kudos in our minds as the 180k.
Yeah.
So if you were to walk the entire trail and that's your first ever 20k, then that you should be so proud of yourself. And the founders of our business walked it. They're in their 70s now, and we had a huge variety of people. And this year we've got 4 recce's, all different levels, to give people the skills, the fitness, and the confidence to come and join us. We fully waymark the trails, and one of those recce's as well is a women's only one, again, just to make people feel comfortable in that space.
Oh, that's amazing. And in the first event, what was the field like? Did you have quite an exciting race?
Yeah, we kind of did. We thought we did, and then Mark Derbyshire kind of put his foot down, and I think he won by nearly 8 hours in the end from second place. So, it was really interesting. Beth Pascal, obviously an incredible athlete, helped us map out what we thought a good time would be. And I think he really showed what is possible. And we're looking forward to next year for people to come back and see that as a benchmark and see what kind of times they can get.
Okay, amazing. So I think one of the best things about ultra running is the kind of community element. I know in one of the interviews in this series, I was chatting to Vassos Alexander about how amazing it is that you're in a race and you've got so many different things going on. You've got people at the front of the pack, then people doing their first ultra, and I think that community and how people can be having so many different races kind of in one is really special. How can people get involved in the community for 13 Valleys?
Yeah, it's something we found last year within the events. People develop friendships on that journey themselves, and we've kind of taken that one step further this year. There is a Facebook group that people can join, and really as many questions are answered by each other as they are by us, but we are there to help people. So we are developing that community through Facebook. People can come and contact us directly.
Because I think, that's one of the best things about trail running. Like in races, you'll chat to people help each other, and it's really special. So if people feel inspired to get involved, how can they find you?
They can find us at 13valuesultra.com or on the usual social channels, and we would love them to come and join us.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Colin.
Thank you.
Now, if you remember last week, we had Emily from SIS on talking about hydration. This week, it's all about nutrition.
Hi guys, for this nutrition section we have the awesome Emily Jevons from SIS talking to us about how to fuel with food during races. So we're going to do a little section on smaller races, or shorter races, sorry, and a little section on sort of half marathons and above. Hey Emily, welcome back. We've had you on before. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thank you. So I want to talk about food and what to eat. Food is my favourite subject generally in life because I love pies, but pies are not a great nutrition strategy for a race. So if I'm doing a 5k or a 10k race, outside of pies, what would you recommend?
So for a 5k and 10k, it depends a little bit on how long you think it'll take you, but you probably can focus on just eating beforehand. The general rule of thumb is if you're eating a healthy, balanced diet, you should have enough energy to last you about 90 minutes of exercise. So for most people, the 5k and 10k will fall in before that, like before 90 minutes. But if you're going really, really high intensity, maybe for the 10k, you might want to have like one energy gel during or just before. So you could have an energy gel or a food source, whatever your preference. Some people like flapjacks, some people like jelly babies, but all the sports nutrition companies, with the reason we are sports nutrition companies is because most of them are science-backed, and we are thinking about the most efficient way your body can digest things, which is why we come up with our products. So if you prefer food, go for it. But one of the most popular options in running is your classic energy gel.
Gels.
Yeah, classic. They are most people's go-to. Some people prefer other options, but runners in particular seem to love these.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about running and energy gels.
I
Love
know
them.
people who go through these things like jelly babies,
Yeah.
and I think you need to be mindful of that, don't you? You need
Yes.
to think about the amount that you're consuming and what you're using it for.
Yeah.
So how do I decide what to have? I mean, obviously you're going to say SIS is the best, but actually talk to me through a gel. Like what should I be looking for, and what should it do for me, and how often should I take it?
Okay, so most of them seem to be recommended if they have around 22 grams of carbohydrate in, which a lot of gels do. I'll talk about the higher carbohydrate ones afterwards, but most generic ones are around the 20-ish mark. They tend to say up to like 3 an hour, so trying to get 60 grams over the hour. Works for some people, doesn't work for others.
So what does the carbohydrate do?
Carbohydrates, they fuel your body massively. So carbohydrates are our body's preferred energy source. We can use fats, we can even use protein, but I won't recommend that. Don't want to eat into our muscles. But for exercise, our bodies does tend to rely on carbohydrates. Again, you can train otherwise, but let's provide it with what our body wants.
So because I hear about this, like carbohydrates versus protein versus fats and all of those kind of things, but carbohydrate is the preferred source.
Yeah, naturally that's your body's preferred source. So again, you can train it otherwise, but...
And is it to do with the speed that you digest it or something?
Yeah, so carbohydrates are quicker for your body to metabolise than fats. So especially if you're going at high intensity, it's a lot more efficient if you have carbohydrate.
Fantastic. Okay, so look for a gel with carbohydrate. If they have 20 odd grams in, then you can have up to 3 an hour?
Usually, with most brands, I know with Science and Sport, it's aim for like around 3 an hour, would be great. But for some people, that might be too much. So trial it in training, test what works for you. Some people might even say, I can stomach more than that, so I'm going to stomach more than that. But it will vary. But with the shorter distance races where you're not going to be going for that long, I'd have one beforehand in the 30 minutes before, just to give you your energy, especially for a 5k, because you probably want to just get on with that. 10k, you might just take one, depending on how long it's going to take you to complete the 10k.
So for a marathon distance or longer, which if you're aiming for a 4-hour marathon and you're taking 3 hours, so you could potentially consume up to 12 gels.
Which sounds like a lot.
That does sound like a lot.
So the advice there is, again, over 90 minutes, that's when we need to think about fueling. And I would recommend like 40, 45 minute intervals. So, but starting before the 90 minutes as well. You don't want to get to 90 minutes without feeling, because then you'll already have used all your energy.
But that's a big problem. That's a really good point, because a lot of people wait until they feel hungry or they
don't.
deteriorate.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
But there are other energy gels out there now that are higher in carbohydrate. Obviously, I'm going to use Science and Sport as an example. So we have the Beta Fuel range, or as I call it, Rocket Fuel. And this is 40 grams of carbohydrate. So it's a lot higher. Okay. And the reason for this being is they are for these like longer endurance events. So then you could carry less gels for the same amount of carbohydrate. And again, you might not have them as often because they've got more, or you might have half of one and spread it out. Ideal when you've got to carry all your own nutrition, of course, isn't it? But the reason for these like more superior gels is because if you were trying to consume over 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour, which not everyone is, it depends on your personal like body weight and things, your body can only process 60 grams in one go of glucose. Like it can't have any more than that. So it's important that we add a different type of carbohydrate so it can work like simultaneously. So that has fructose in as well. So fructose and glucose, think about little transporters in your blood, they're working together instead. So they're like maxed out.
I feel like you know what you're talking about. But this is really hard with nutrition. I think what's really good to know is that actually the science-backed principles behind these gels and how they work. I think one thing that we've come across, and certainly I've come across in my running, is I used to eat before, because everyone says eat before you get hungry, and particularly for longer distance. I tend to do ultras, so it's a different type of fueling. They say eat before you get hungry, but then I was getting to a point where I was overeating and I was feeling really full and bloated. So there's probably an element of, to your point, try it in training and see how it goes.
Practice makes perfect. And also, you just don't know how your gut's going to respond to things. So that's why it's worth trying. Also, all sorts of different intensities. Some people go out on an easy long run, try the nutrition and think it's great for their race day. But on the race day, they're trying to go at high intensity and they're like, oh, why am I struggling with my nutrition? It's because they hadn't tried it running at those intensities.
In race conditions,
Yeah, so you've got to try it in different runs as well. Like, don't just use it on your easy long run. Trial and error. If you prefer more food-like approaches, use more food. And if you
I always prefer a more food-like approach, like in general life.
I love, we do, the Beta Fuel range has an energy chew as well, which is almost like, you know, like jelly.
Oh, I love those.
Like jelly
They're
cubes.
so
I
good.
love them. Like, that was, I fueled an Ironman on them practically.
They're absolutely amazing.
They're my personal preference. So I'd rather have something to chew on than a gel. But again, runners seem to love gels. Don't know what it is about them.
No, I think actually, and often where gels, I think, have a real place to, if you're thinking about continuous fueling throughout a race, in longer races when you can't eat, it's often quite difficult to chew, when particularly in sort of ultra distances. So actually having a gel is a really good way of getting the correct volume of nutrients and carbohydrates into your body.
But everyone needs to remember, no littering. Always remember.
Absolutely.
Do not litter. But I remember when we spoke about hydration, I said to have a look at the aid stations and what's available on your race. Exactly the same for nutrition. So check out what gels are going to be available, what they might have bananas and stuff as well, and just make sure you practice with it beforehand. So like specific marathons will normally put in the event guide what they've got available, and so you can practice. And it's usually who they're sponsored by, so check that information out before you race.
And those gels, those companies would always be really credible and good companies, but that product may not agree with you on a personal level, so it's worth testing.
They all have slightly different consistencies, things like that to consider.
And taste. What's the best taste?
Ooh, what flavour?
Yeah, for the gels.
Ooh, I'm strawberry and lime for the Beta Fuel. But again, I prefer the chews, and the lemon chews are my favourite on that.
The lemon chews.
Yeah, the lemon chews are my go-to. And I don't really use the Go Energy ones myself, purely because I do a lot of long distance, so I prefer the less is more approach of like carrying stuff. But, yeah.
Fantastic. This has been really interesting, and actually I hadn't realised there were two types of gels. So actually for people doing those longer runs, I think that's really good insight.
Yeah,
so,
it's really good to know. And it's not just Science and Sport that do those as well. There are some other brands out there, so it's worth keeping an eye out.
This has been really fascinating. Emily, thank you for coming on again. We'll hopefully see you again soon. Guys, on to the next bit.
And finally, for this week's advice section, we welcome Tom Hollis. If you're struggling to fuel for your long runs, then this section is for you.
Hi, it's Jamie here from Runderwear, and now we're moving into the advice section and the first part of our nutritional advice with Tom Hollis. How are we doing, Tom?
Yeah, I'm very good today.
Yeah,
How
good
are you,
stuff.
Jamie?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, mate. Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. So a little bit of background to how Tom and I know each other. Tom is brother of one of my best friends, and so we've known each other for quite a number of years. and you came over to our Runderwear stand many years ago, running. Was that your first marathon at London?
No, that would have been third one,
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Done 10 now, and I think that was number 3.
Wow.
But that was my first
Yeah.
one in the UK. I'd done 2 overseas ones.
So what were your first two?
Berlin, first one.
Really?
But that's when it wasn't as difficult to qualify for. Although it was still a major, you could just get a place. You could just buy a place. That was in 2013.
Yeah.
Then Rotterdam 2015, and then London the year after that.
Brilliant.
So
And then
it would have been about 2016, I think.
okay, and the next 7, just for
So since then, 5 Londons,
yeah,
1 Manchester,
yeah,
and 1 Valencia, which was my most recent one.
which we'll get to in a second. So when you first came onto that stand, I think you were looking to try and break 3 hours, if I remember rightly, coming over and wanting to break 3 hours. Is that right?
Yeah. So I'd done 2:59 at Rotterdam, second one.
Right.
It might have even been before then that we spoke. But
Maybe.
Yeah. So I was in that sort of ballpark.
In that ballpark.
Yeah.
And now Valencia. Talk us through just Valencia, just for context for the sort of listeners and viewers.
So yeah, fast forward 7 years
Yeah.
from then. I've just been slowly chipping away at that time. It's not been completely linear progression, but chipping away, and I'm down to 2 hours, 30 and 11 seconds.
Pretty amazing. And I've been following the journey and absolutely loving it. And now talking about the nutritional advice and background, frame a little bit of background as to where it sits in your life and how you got into that position.
The nutrition side of things?
That's right.
So I am a registered dietitian.
Yeah.
That is my main accreditation, if you like, my main qualification. So I've worked in the NHS for 10 years, half of which were on intensive care in the busiest London intensive care during COVID period, which was obviously a pretty memorable experience.
Yeah.
Good and bad, mainly bad. So yeah, registered dietitian from a clinical perspective, and then about 4 years ago, I've always been interested in sports nutrition because I've always been sporty and had the nutrition background.
Yeah.
But thought I want to be more qualified, more certified from a sports nutrition perspective. So did that postgraduate course to become qualified as a sports nutritionist. I've set up my own company to do sports nutrition, most of which are running clients. And I've been slowly building that up alongside my day-to-day clinical work.
Sounds great. I mean, a passion for it, or both, should I say, fused together, and the result is pretty good. So
it's good.
Fantastic.
And obviously, I apply everything that I give to my clients to myself, and I like to think it's been a big part of my progression.
Absolutely, yeah. So coming on to that, so my first question, so carb loading, big myths around it, lots of different things out there on the internet. Firstly, what's your opinion? Secondly, I've moved away from big sort of carb load, porridge mornings before marathons and big long runs, and I've seen a bit of an uptick.
Interesting.
It's interesting. I'm still taking on carbohydrates, but not quite to the same degree of possibly slow release carbohydrates. So interested to hear your thoughts around carb loading and my experience as well.
Well, I'd say the first thing with anything nutrition science related is there's the evidence, there's the textbooks, but people don't fit neatly into the science. Everyone's physiology is very slightly different. So it's not good to just say these are the numbers and give you the numbers and deal with it, because it doesn't work for everyone. Everyone responds slightly differently. What's also really important from a individual carb load perspective is what your day-to-day diet is like, your training diet, I would call that. So if when you're in your marathon block, you're a low-ish or low to medium carb intake, then there's absolutely no point trying to pump your body full of carbs in race week, because you're going to tolerate that really badly because your body's not used to dealing with it.
Makes sense.
You'll feel bloated, you'll have other GI issues, you're going to feel really sluggish, which is going to have more of a detrimental impact than the potential benefit of the carb load in the first place.
Yeah.
That said, like, the evidence for carb loading is very strong. So ultimately, the main cause of hitting the wall. Hitting the wall means running out of glycogen, which is the muscle's stored carbohydrate. There's no reason to hit the wall if you pace the race right and if you fuel for it properly. And that means beforehand and during the run. The carb load is a huge part of that. There are specific numbers that you can aim for in the build-up. Usually I would normally recommend from the Thursday evening of race week, assuming that the marathon is on the Sunday morning. That's when you start. And Friday and Saturday are the key carb load days. Arguably Friday is the more important day.
Interesting.
I think some people make the mistake of leaving it too late until Saturday.
Interesting.
You know, you've got the classic pasta party on the Saturday night. If you've not really done anything till then and you have huge portions of pasta, that's not going to feel good at all. So if that's something that you've done previously, it wouldn't surprise me that it didn't feel good.
I talk in one of the other episodes about a real problem I had at Berlin half, but I don't really want to go back into that because that's actually a nightmare. So I don't want to relive that. But so talking about, is there specific carbohydrates that are better than others?
Again, and I don't want to be too general, but everyone has their own preferences, and those are going to be taste preferences. There might be kind of innate intolerance issues as well. For example, some people can't tolerate much wheat, which is going to be an easy option for a lot of other people. But generally speaking, you want to be going for lower fat meals with your fibre with your carbs, and lower fibre carb options as well. 2 reasons. So fat provides lots of calories, it's energy dense, and if you're getting the calories in from carbs that you really need in those 2 days, you can do without those additional calories from fat because you'll be too full and you won't be able to maximise the carb load. The other reason is fat slows down your digestion, and you really want efficient digestion in those couple of days. You don't want things sitting heavy in your stomach and your gut, which is the reason why fibre should be temporarily reduced as well. So you would be wanting white varieties of your carbs, so white rice, white pasta, white bread and bread products, white potatoes, things like that, things that are really simple to digest. Polar opposite from what you would say is typical healthy eating advice for most people. Training diet, but also race week diet, which is more extreme than training diet. And so taking pasta as an example, some people might have an enormous bowl of carbonara, say, which is really rich and creamy and full of fat, full of stuff that you don't need the night before a marathon. So not only have you got all of those carbs, but you've got loads of things that you don't need and are going to be making you feel rough. It's probably going to affect your sleep, and it will affect the way that you feel in the morning as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't emphasise enough, if you're a first-time marathoner and you're coming up to London, Manchester, Edinburgh, Paris, something this spring, getting this nutrition right and practicing it on the long runs, I found really helpful. And being quite scientific and a bit nerdy about it, not just sort of going out the door, oh, well, it's just a long run. Treat it a bit like a race. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it doesn't mean that every Sunday long run needs to be a perfect replica of what you'll do in your spring marathon. But they are the opportunities to be practicing things and getting into a bit of a routine. So you're never going to do a full carb load before every Sunday long run because it would actually be quite unhealthy. But occasionally, on some of your more significant, longer runs, you might want to consider doing that, or at least getting close to it. You want to be practicing your race morning breakfast, timing, type, and you also want to be practicing your mid-run fueling. Gels for most people. And like I say, it doesn't mean that you need to be doing it to the extreme every Sunday. And also, it's good to be kind of having some long runs where you do drain the system a bit more, because it's good for your body to be able to run in a lower carb state and a high carb, well-fueled state. Something called metabolic flexibility, where basically your body's good at running at marathon pace whilst using fats and whilst using carbs.
Yeah.
Because you're going to need both on race day.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, look, thanks so much for joining us today, Tom.
Pleasure.
Really enjoy it. It's something that I think we need to go on a much deeper dive anyway. It's that it keeps on, you keep peeling back another layer and there's more information. So keeping it, I think you did a really great job at just nailing it to the basics. So thanks so much.
Cool. Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jamie.
And that's the end of the advice section of this week's episode.
Thank you for making it this far. Please do leave a like, a comment, a rating, all of that fun stuff. But let's throw it back over to the host for a quick outro.
Thank you very much for joining us for another episode of the Pod Show. So today we've focused a little bit on tech. So I want to talk a little bit about tech disasters. Have you had an absolute shocker with tech on any of your runs?
I think my main one is just really speaks more to how overly reliant on it. So I'm trying really hard to get better at navigation because I'm way too reliant on like phone apps. And I was running up to Cadair Idris in Snowdonia last year. I was wearing a new running pack. The pocket was a bit smaller than my old one, and I'd gone up this horrible scree slope, and my phone tumbled down this scree slope and like vanished into the scree below.
Shocker.
And I did manage to get it back, but I just remember thinking I've really got to learn how to read a proper map because it just made me realise how reliant I was on it, to be honest. So It wasn't the tech's fault, but I was lost at the thought of that phone being
The general weak point
gone.
in the tech is you,
Yes.
basically.
It was me.
Jamie, have you got a disaster?
Not hugely, but I think disasters for me are when I'm out on the road and I haven't charged my and it goes off.
Oh, that's annoying.
That's annoying.
So annoying.
So you're 7 minutes into a run and beep, and it goes and you run out of battery, and that is my disaster. It doesn't happen that often, but that's a disaster for me.
I once entered a 50-mile race and I had the route on my watch, and somehow I had it going the wrong way, so it kept trying to send me back to the start. So I was like, I basically felt like I was running the route in reverse, and I had to try and work backwards on the map the whole way around. It was awful. Anyway, so what you've realised here is we are absolutely useless with tech, but we are great at bringing you awesome content for the National Running Show Pod Show. And I'd like to remind you of the Runderwear Competition. Don't forget that if you follow the show notes, you can enter into a draw to win £100 of Runderwear vouchers. Or if you go to the Runderwear website, you can use their code PODSHOW to get 10% off. Thank you for joining us on this episode. We will see you same time next week. Thanks.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for watching. Please leave a review if you're listening, and also like, subscribe, comment. Let us know what all your thoughts are if you're watching on YouTube. Oh, and don't forget that our sponsors Runderwear are giving away another £100. So please check out the notes in this podcast to find out how you can win, and check out the first 2 episodes to see how you can enter those competitions.